Get the show on the road. I just got the thumbs up, so we're pretty much active and ready to go. Thanks to everyone for turning up tonight. My name's Rob Arnold. I'll just be trying to moderate this evening's discussion about AusCycling. I think everyone knows why we're here. We're all bike riders. We come from different walks of life, and there's been a roadshow that's visited various cities around Australia already, so maybe you've seen some of the live streaming, and that's just one thing I'd like to point out tonight. When the Q&A is on, this is also being live streamed, so if you just have a question, just if you could kindly wait until you get the microphone so that that audio can go online as well. Otherwise, there's not a great deal that needs introducing. I think most of the people understand the premise of this, and it's the coming together of some cycling families. So we want BMX, mountain bike, road, track, cyclocross, and everyone to be governed by one entity, or that's the premise of the whole concept. There's a whole lot of literature that's been out there for a couple of months, and last week during the live broadcasts of the road shows in various places around Australia, you would have learned a little bit more. We've got Duncan Murray, who's the chair of Cycling Australia, Shane Coppen, who's CEO of Mountain Bike Australia, and Martin Shaw, who's from BMX Australia. They're the speakers tonight. I'm here to basically watch the room and get the vibe of what cycling's like in Tasmania. It's great to see everyone here. Thanks for making the effort. I'm not going to talk too much longer, other than to say that we'll do some intros and we'll kick the proceedings off with an overview of the whole concept from Duncan Murray.
Thanks, Rob. As Rob said, Shane and Martin will step through the slides, and I think this is a concept you're all familiar with, so I won't bother outlining it, but we'll leave that for Shane and Martin. The only introductory comments I would make is that this is quite a accepted and supported concept in some circles, and a very controversial concept in other circles. And I've been thinking about it. I've been chairman of Cycling Australia for a year and a half. I've been thinking about it, and the presidents of all the state organisations have been thinking about it, calmly, and I think with wisdom, for 18 months now, and I haven't been able to think of another answer that works. And the issue is, I think our sport and the sector is in trouble in some quarters, in many quarters, and we're missing out on a lot of opportunity. In the car on the way here with Noel and some other directors of Cycling Tasmania, we were talking about some of the trends. Volunteering is going down, electric bikes are coming at us. All the manufacturers will tell you 70% of bikes sold in 5 years' time will be electric. Are they motor vehicles? Are they bicycles? There are 1.4 million people who are old school in the world, who, mine's on a clip there, who have a UCI affiliated licence to race a bike, a BMX, a road bike or a mountain bike, and there's 1.55 million people riding on Zwift. So there are more people racing bikes in their TVs than there are in the real world, and you can tell which way the graph's going. When an organisation like Woolworths come to us and say, how come there isn't a national bike ed version of AusKick or AusSwim? We'd love to sponsor that and send money to the grassroots. We can't do it as a sport. Now, there's 19 organisations, 19 boards, 138 directors, and we haven't got a great history of being cooperative and working together across the three disciplines, or within the three federations, or the two federations. Mountain bike's not federated. As I jokingly said in the car, if Arnott's called us and said, we would like to sponsor you and give free Scotch finger biscuits to cycling, there would be a 6-month debate about whether Scotch fingers were the right biscuits or Kingston should be the biscuits. We're not very good. We're very good at squabbling amongst these 19 organisations and these 19 bureaucracies. And I've been at a club level. I've gone from a club level to where I am now in one leap. And I've for 30 years heard clubs and complain about the state organisations and complain about the national organisations and that they're unsupported. When you call CA, the phone isn't answered. When you call the state organisation, I don't get the resources. You know, if I want a document about where to get volunteers or how to work with Rotary or how to do a learn to ride women's course, like there are all these things at a club level I want from the bureaucracy above, from all of these people, 138 directors, 19 CEOs. I don't get the support I want at club level. And until we professionalise the sport and create that national infrastructure so that in the centre there is, and you'll see in the slides, you know, a head of club services with, you know, whatever it is, 8 or 10 people sitting there providing the answers. And I think all the challenges we've got, someone's worked out the answer to. A club in Bunbury, a club in Cairns, a club in Toowoomba, all the problems we've got, there's some clever person who's got the answer. It just can't get sucked into the centre and sent out. You know, when the marketing director of Mattel toy company called us in the early part of last year and said, you know, we've missed the digital boat. Our kids aren't playing with Barbies anymore, they're playing on their phones. We've got X million dollars, we'd like to sponsor all kids who ride bikes from 5 to 11. How do we do that? We can do it in footy, we can do it in tennis, we can do it in cricket, but we'd like to do it in bike riding. And we say, right, well, we'll have to organise a conference call for 19 CEOs. That'll take a month. Then we'll need to ask who's got the data, who's collating all the data of kids riding. Half will have it, half won't. Even if they all did have the data on all kids' bike riding activities from 5 to 11, and if we could write a 20-page deck of slides to give to you, we've then got to have a conversation about how we divide the $1 million up across 19 organisations, and that'll be a slugfest. So you can't engage with cycling. Go find another sport. My daughter does a Wednesday night women's only track clinic. I go to pick her up, not allowed to stay because I'm the wrong gender. I go to pick her up at 8 o'clock at the velodrome, and I'm talking to another mum who's picking up her daughter, and she says, how many of these women's only cycling groups do you think there are nationally? And I said, why do you ask? She said, I'm a marketer at Unilever in feminine products, in grazers, etc., etc. And I said, well, I don't know, I lived in Cairns for 6 years, there were 3 up there. I don't know, I'm guessing. No, actually, no one knows is the answer to your question, but I reckon there's 300 or 400. And she said, well, how many would the average size be? And I said, I don't know, 20 or 30. And she said, well, how do I sponsor all of them? And I'd had the Mattel conversation 2 months beforehand. And I just put my head in my hands and go, oh, hard. I know there are all these amazing women running women's only groups, and they would be gutted if they knew I was telling you it's too hard. If they could each get a cheque of 10 grand a year, they'd jump up and down. And then there's kids. You know, I've got a dog and I walk it on a Saturday morning and I go sit in the park with my dog. And when I grew up, there were kids roaming. I built my first bike, a BMX from a hard rubbish collection out of spare parts. And my mates and I would go, you know, you'd walk out the door, you'd have Weet-Bix, you'd head out the door, you'd go for a bike ride, you'd come back at 5 o'clock. And the suburbs are full of kids roaming the streets. These days they're all sitting at home on game consoles and Steve Jobs' devices. Kids aren't riding bikes. There's real health in BMX, but across the spectrum, cycling's becoming a really unpopular sport for children. My 9-year-old, again, back to the car trip on the way here, my 9-year-old a couple of years ago says, Dad, I want to ride my bike to school. I said, great, buy her a bike. She rides to school. 11 o'clock in the morning, I get a call from the school that says, your kid rode a bike to school. I said, yeah, it's grouse. How good is that? They said, well, we've got advice from our insurer that we owe her a duty of care. And if she has an accident on the way to school, you can come over after us. So we've pulled out the bike shed, and the school council's passed a policy discouraging kids from riding to school because it's dangerous. We'd prefer if they came in the back of your wife's four-wheel drive. And if your daughter is going to insist on riding her bike to school, we'll email you a waiver and you've got to release us. So I think we've got some real challenges. The thing as a federation we're best at doing is arguing. We're not really good at growing this sport, and it's not just a sport. You know, I live in Melbourne, I lived in Cairns for 6 years, I'm back in Melbourne. There's a conversation there about density and affordable housing. In a beautiful place like this, it's less of an issue, but cycling is the transport mode of the future. And if you think for 19 of us, these three disciplines and all these federations can influence Commonwealth government policy on how cycling should be the transport mode of the future, you're whistling Dixie. There isn't a single politician in Australia who feels under any pressure from cycling. So we need to find a better answer, and we need to find an answer where it stays healthy at a club level, it stays healthy at a state level, everybody trusts each other, and we don't just act collaboratively, we actually work together as one team. Because if we're having this conversation in 5 years, it'll be too late. And the final thing is, the highlight for me to date is that we actually all are in this room. There's a debate about how old the oldest club is. I said 138 years earlier, someone else said it's older than that. But in the history of this sport, all the disciplines haven't come together in one room and had a conversation. The first time I called Martin's boss, the president of BMX 18 months ago, he would only have coffee with me on an anonymous basis. Now, if I told the board of BMX I was having coffee with some, chairman of a road organisation, who knows, he probably even shaves his legs, I'll be gutted, I'll be hung, drawn and quartered. So I'll come and have a cup of coffee with you, but only if you never tell anyone about it. That's where we were 18 months ago. And now we're all having this conversation. There isn't screaming agreement. We're not getting love letters from everybody. Some people like it, some people don't. But at least we're all in one room, all three disciplines. We're going around the country having a conversation about it. And it's not a moment too early. So I'm hopeful something comes out of it. This is the best idea we've been able to come up with. People keep producing high-level concepts. What about if you just merge the NSOs and do nothing else? Not sure what that gets us there. So it is the best idea we've been able to come up with. We've put a lot of time and effort because we're all here for the same reason. We're all here because we love bikes. It can be small wheels, it can be big wheels, it can be skinny wheels, it can be fat wheels, but we're all here because we love bikes, and people with great integrity and great passion and day jobs, like most of us, have put 1.5 years into this because we love the sport and we don't want it to go down the gurgler, and we're looking at the gurgler. So please listen in good faith and optimism. Thanks.
Next up is Shane Coppen, who's going to talk through the slide presentation. I just want to point out, as you've probably heard from Duncan, he's had a couple of lines of discussion that he's repeated often over the last couple of weeks, and it's a tried and tested dialogue, and it's basically to try and state the obvious, and that is the time has come for cycling to evolve, become modern, take advantages of all of the evolution that's come. It wasn't that long ago that mountain biking was new to Australia. It wasn't that long ago that even before that BMX was new to Australia. I came to cycling through a love of bike riding. I've started with BMX, I've gone to road, I've ridden track, I've gone onto the mountain bike, and I probably spend more time on my mountain bike than any other bike. I think there's probably a lot of people in the room who have done similar. Most people that I've heard talk about this principle have all raised issues about how to get the youth involved. I too am a father of two young bike riders, a 9-year-old and a 14-year-old. They have ridden every discipline known to cycling, and they love it, but we're confused. And if they could get one licence that allowed them to do all, it's going to be a huge benefit. And now it's time for Shane just to talk you through some of the detail that he's practiced as well. It's a slideshow. It goes on for a little while, but the time will come afterward. And a lot of the questions that you probably have mulling in your mind now, we should be answered during this presentation. But if you can just hold off until the talking's done, and then we'll throw it open to the floor.
Thanks, Rob. Welcome all. Thanks for coming out to hear this presentation. I've been around with mountain bike coming up to 6 years now, and I guess one of the biggest things that as I reflect back through this process in discussing AusCycling and what is AusCycling, is that I look at the things that we've achieved, but I've also considered and thought about all the opportunities that we've missed. And collectively we've missed many opportunities to work with BMX, opportunities to work with CA, opportunities to seek improved funding, opportunities to do things collectively just for people who ride a bike. And ultimately that's what we're here. We've worked on developing a model that is centred on the rider, centred on clubs, centred on people who ride. And we've spent a long time, just to give you a quick history, Martin and I, with our respective chairs, went to Sport Australia back in late 2016, at which time we said, this relationship is just not working with CA. This relationship for cycling is just not working. We're not getting the outcomes, we're not achieving our potential. All these things were just missing, and we had that discussion, and from that there was some moderate and further discussions that rolled through in the next year or so. Nothing really got traction, but we continued to do that. And then finally, with some change in leadership both in management and at the board of CA, we were able to sort of chip in and have some really tangible discussions about, could we do something better? How could we do something better collectively? It wasn't about one dominating another or telling this or that. We actually got to a point where we could sit down and understand the challenges, the problems, the limitations that we had created really for ourselves by being so fragmented, and how could we bring that together and achieve something that would be better for all riders. We've spent a lot of time, worked with a lot of consultants, consulted with many people through this process, and we've worked to develop a model that we think is one respectful to all disciplines, respectful to all governance structures, respectful to the members and the riders that make up all of our sport. There's 55,000 people, so when we look at this, we've tried to build a model around those 55,000 people, the 500 odd clubs that make up the whole collective group. So we've spent a lot of time trying to get to a model that we think is fair, but most important we think is workable and that can genuinely bring about outcomes. And when we go through the slide, I ask that you consider what this model, we're talking about positioning the organisations and cycling into a changed framework, a changed environment so that it can reach its potential. And there's 2.5 million to 4 million people, depending who you listen to, riding bikes. We're 55 odd thousand. The advocacy groups maybe have 50 or 60,000 riders. We are a long way from achieving our potential. And I think that cycling, personally, there is no reason why in 10 years we can't have 250,000 members if we just show a way and create opportunities for people to get involved. So when we go through the deck, consider what this could look like in 5, 10, 15, 25 years, but also consider if we don't change, what our future looks like. Do we continue to be small organisations surviving and hoping just to scrape by every year? If we don't get that grant funding or grants are dropped, we're in a survival mode. Do we have to cut back staff and cut back services? Think about what that means for our grandkids, their kids, their grandkids. So as we go through, write down your questions. We'll try and answer them all when we get to the end, but just consider what a new future could look like. So, what have I done here? Did I miss the video, guys? Sorry. I'm just told we've got a video, so sorry about that. Okay. So I think one of the best things about AusCycling is rooms like this. This is the 7th roadshow we've done. We've had a few other workshops, and just to get in rooms, and actually the tagline there is let's ride together, but now what we're talking about is let's work together to bring about a video like that that's reality for many, many people into the future. So some of the initial tangible benefits as a result of AusCycling will be that we're looking at a single race license. When we talk about that, we're talking about making it easier to race across disciplines. That's really what this is about. It's an opportunity for you to have one license and to turn up at a BMX race, or turn up at a track race, or turn up at a mountain bike race on that one license and be eligible and able to race. Other things that we're looking to do is improve the volume and the access to resources, for clubs and for members. But certainly there is a need, and we think that through the capability and the experience of all the staff that work with all the various organisations, that we can do better collectively for clubs and for members. We can create templates that Duncan alluded to about helping apply for grants or infrastructure projects. There's so many things that we can work towards in those areas. Unification across the disciplines is going to improve commercial outcomes. Duncan went through some examples. He's right, we make it really, really hard for sponsors, partners, and even government and those groups to deal with us. I think a recent example was all three of us put a grant into Sport Australia separately. Collectively we end up with 1.2 million, but it's all diluted because it's put across the three organisations. That money should come into one cumulative pot to be delivered across participation outcomes. So by unifying, we improve the opportunities, we make it easier to access our sport and our organisation to support. Direct investment into securing facilities and infrastructure. So when we talk about that, it's about lobbying and helping grow capacity to do that. It's not about AusCycling funding your new project, but it's about AusCycling facilitating that opportunity and helping you get those grants or helping you open those doors with government so that you can get new facilities and places to ride. It's one voice. When you consider that all 19 are broken down, mountain bike is 17,000, BMX is approximately 14, 15, road and tracks 24,000. Come together, we're 55,000. It's much easier to ignore us while we're all diluted. And when you also consider that down into the various state and territory levels and you break the disciplines apart again, that number dilutes even more. But when you're all branded under one organisation, say AusCycling, and you walk into a room, you have the strength and the voice of 55,000 members behind you collectively, and that will get noticed. There's better career paths for staff. Right now, a lot of small organisations, some have staff, some don't. The most has about 19, 20, the next is about 16, and then we drop down to about 10. And there's some real challenges running these small businesses. You lose staff, it's a massive hole in your organisation. We sit with about 16, 17 staff and we lose our finance manager. It puts us into a spin. We don't have the capacity to draw on many other resources. Collectively, however, there's 82 odd staff working throughout the country on cycling. There's a national footprint for all disciplines. A bike ed program. We've talked about this a lot, and this is something that's really critical, and Steve Drake likes to talk about just the lack of kids riding their bike today. There's a need to get more kids on riding their bike. He always uses his green dragster analogy that his mum used to kick him out the door and tell him go and don't come back till it's dark. That doesn't happen anymore. And there are some other challenges that are coming. There's esports, I'm sure in time there'll be people racing their downhill sitting on a comfy armchair while they're looking at a screen that's sitting on top of their face. So we need to get more kids out riding, and we need to do that through a national education program. We need to get it into the schools. We fall well behind the AusCycle and the crickets in those worlds. One of the critical things in this process has been around a national volunteer recognition program. And that goes beyond that. We recognise that the heart and soul of the sport is clubs and members and the volunteers who deliver all the activities that you do, the events, the racing, the courses, the kids programs, all those things, the trail building, all those things are relying on volunteers. And collectively, we've talked about, even in MTBA, about trying to go and create a program to recognise volunteers. It's very hard to get support and sponsors and partners for that. But collectively, we have an opportunity to do that. to create something that is recognising the volunteer contributions nationally, but also it extends beyond that to provide an avenue or a facility where volunteers can register on a database, and you as club members, when you're holding events, you can promote to a more global base. It doesn't just have to be road-based or mountain bike, it could be something else, just to help ease the load and recognise volunteers. And obviously greater financial strength with more investment. Bigger organisation, bigger voice, you'll gain extra support from government, you'll gain extra support from partners. Collectively, we don't even hold, I don't think anyone holds a cash sponsor more than 100,000 across all the organisations, unless it's event related, so it's quite minor. So the one licence, the membership fee model, we've talked about this a few times and I'll just quickly run through it. It is a model that is based on a membership fee, so you join as a member of AusCycle, which makes you a recreational member or a ride member in some cases, and that gives you the benefit of insurance and access to information. Then if you wish to race, you can join and upgrade to a race membership or a race licence, and there's an option for a dirt licence and there's an option for an all discipline, which includes all the dirt activities as well as the road and track. One of the key things that we've endeavoured to do here is make it affordable for families. We've listened. There's a number of people paying a lot of money to ride their bike, and in a lot of cases, people just can't afford to ride two disciplines, and it's, you know, it becomes expensive. I want to have a go at something else, but I've got to pay this high fee to go and do that. So we've endeavoured to create a structure that is reflective but cheaper in most cases where we can to what exists today, but to give you real value for money. So when you look at a fee and it's slightly increased in your case, consider that that might now offer another discipline that you didn't previously have before, and now you can pay for it. There's family discounts will apply, there's rolling memberships, day licenses and trial licenses will be offered, various payment options, and this slide does not have it. We'll come on to that a bit later, sorry. So if we look at some benefits for riders, and I'm sure that there'll be many more as you go through it, but this is just a starting point. A clear and consistent pathway. So that if you get involved in cycling, you have one number, one organisation that you can talk to about what your ambitions, what your goals, what your dreams are, and let them then lead you, because you're all within the one network. They can guide you through that system. They don't go, well, we don't do that discipline here, you need to move across. Advocacy for safety and awareness, better value memberships. It's not about just the price. It's about us improving the value of the membership. And that's about us going out and finding some really tangible partners who can support that and make the deal more worthwhile to you. Who knows, Airbnb might want to get involved and offer discounts when you go race and offer you a discount if you're a non-cycling member. Who knows what those potentials may be, but it's about getting better value into membership. Talked about one license, cheaper for the majority, a much louder, stronger voice, and better infrastructure and facilities. Everyone's crying out facilities. We want more facilities, want more facilities. Let's make sure we don't get ignored. Let's make sure we've got the voice, but we've also got the staff and the workforce who can support you with the information, the data, the proposals, the evidence to support your desires to get those funds and to get those grants and to get those new facilities. The benefit for clubs, better recognition for volunteers we talked about. Systems to improve, you know, there's concepts around, do we go and develop a system that could involve online accounting for clubs to access so that if your treasurer change over, all your data's still in one place? Who knows, there's multiple opportunities for here. Resources, checklists, single policies. Instead of 3 or 19 organisations having the same policy for one thing, let's centralise that and make it easier for you to access and understand. National education program, coaching support to build capability. And this is a critical one. Part of the Pathways program of AusCycling is geared towards improving the capability and capacity of clubs. And to do that, we have to give you opportunities to get the skills, to get access to the resources, so that you can then pass that through and use that in your club activities. A dedicated club support and development team. So right now, we've all got various membership teams. We want to create a team of membership champions. You ring one number, and those people get there and they take care of your needs. The thing what we want to do is stop ever hearing, that's someone else's problem and you need to ring them. What we want is, thank you, I'll fix that, and they get back to you. So we're trying to improve all those aspects of what we do. And obviously infrastructure advocacy, and the last one is around, we've had this question a little bit, what happens to my club? Do I have to give my assets to AusCycle? Do I have to change my constitution? All this? No change. There's no change. Clubs continue to do what you do. We just have to get better in providing you the resources and support that come with that. So there's no direct impact. If you've got a concern that might relate, please ask us. So we looked at some benefits to Tasmanian cyclists based on some information that we had. And we talk about the single licence, savings for some, greater opportunity to race all disciplines, greater opportunities for pathways and support of future riders. And we want to do that because as a collective voice, we can access greater funding for pathways. We can access greater funding through government or potential commercial partners. And the other areas that we can get better at is in a bigger workforce. If you don't have the direct skills in this location, we can draw on that from other locations. It's about sharing and building on what exists throughout the country. A minimum of 3 staff will be allocated to Tasmania from day one to deliver outcomes at the ground. Access to national staff to support these staff on the ground, and greater presence to lobby for infrastructure and capitalise on government support. And then they've done some analysis on these, on the different fees currently and under the AusCycling model. So we can get you a copy of this if you like afterwards. So we looked at a few examples of how the AusCycling fees compare to other locations and under the current structure. So we looked at a family, we grabbed everyone from across all the disciplines. This is a Queensland-based family. Dad rides road and mountain bike, mum just rides as a rec, and then the kids ride either a combination. And the total fee currently under today's structure is about $806. And then under the AusCycling structure, it's around about $575 for the same. And that's before we apply a family discount. So we're talking about a discount in the 5 to 10% type mark, so it will come down even again. So I think in that sense, it's quite comparative. And when you think about this, this now means that these kids here, who might have been BMX only, can now go and ride mountain bike. They can go over ride on the road or ride on the track. There's no additional fee for that to occur except the relevant club fees. So if we have a look at this one's an example of a female elite rider in New South Wales. And again, you can see that there's quite a considerable saving. And that'll allow her to ride BMX, I guess, if she wants as well. So some of the opportunities that we're talking about, and we don't expect this one to come from day one. And like everything with change, not everything switch on like a light switch. It takes time to mature. And this is once we get to a point of being able to transition to AusCycling, it's a 12 to 18 months process to really bring this about. And it takes a lot of work with a lot of people, and we really need to get to that point so we can get involved with local stakeholders, local workforces, local boards to build the transition program. But this example is based around what happened in the UK a few years back, and the HSBC funding program. Once British Cycling were able to get all their assets and all their products together, they were able to have some meaningful discussions. And this sponsorship program with HSBC is worth about £8 million a year. It's a multi-year program, so that's about 14.5 million Australian dollars. We're not sitting here saying this is going to happen day one. We use this as an example of what the benefit becomes when you can talk about grassroots. It goes from grassroots activity right through to their national and elite programs. So because they're in a coordinated process, they can actually deliver across a range of areas, and they're able to capitalise on greater opportunities for support. We had a look at the last federal election, so the one earlier in the year, and we looked at the commitments made by government towards different sports to secure votes and outcomes for them. And if you have a look at this slide, talks about a number of funding commitments that went to professional sport, and we need to be very mindful that professional sport is really challenging and dominating the Olympic sports and the non-professional sport, which is what our sport currently falls into. And we need to be conscious that if their marketplace changes, if television coverage and rights come down, they're going to start looking for where they replace that revenue from, and it'll come back down the line. They'll be seeking the smaller sponsors to backfill all those areas and things. And we need to ensure that we've got a strong enough voice that we can protect our sport and that we can future-proof ourselves just as much as they will. But if you have a look, $150 million was committed to community facilities. Some significant numbers. Netball received a lot of money. But then when you look at the commitment to cycling or mountain bike out of the federal or BMX, it was zero. We simply are not, it's not that we're not, we just don't speak with enough volume to get a politician to worry about whether they support us or not in these endeavours. They're just not worried about it. If you take cricket, for example, cricket currently have about 12 staff whose job is to lobby government. That's what they do. They walk the halls, be it state, be it national, federal, and they just walk the halls. And they raise a minimum every year of $50 million out of monies. You want a new project, they go and knock on the door. They want a new cricket ground in a local area, neighbourhood. That organisation starts knocking the doors. They have the relationships. They have the clout to get heard. We currently live in a fragmented structure, and I'm sure many of you are aware of this. We've got 3 NSOs that are operating as separate organisations today. Separate boards, separate management, separate membership fees, the whole lot. Then we've got, in 2 of the cases, we've got a further 8 organisations with separate boards, in some cases management and staff, setting their own membership fees, I would imagine, having their own needs. But when you consider all these 19 entities that sit there, our objectives are all probably the same. Get more members, deliver great service to our members, deliver great events, more events, deliver education, all these different things. The objectives will be the same across all of them. But what we're doing is diluting, and let's not be silly, we're actually competing collectively against each other. We need to change that to be competing with each other as one collectively. So that's the structure that we've got. MTBA is a unitarian structure, therefore it's just riders and clubs join. So under the AusCycling model, we're talking about a new structure that looks like this. AusCycling, an office in each state and territory. There'll be national functions in some of those. Obviously one will probably have the tag head office, but that's about it. But all these offices will exist around the country to deliver service. And the one access point for people who want to get involved in the sport. So a kid comes home and says, I want to race my bike, mum. Mum looks up one number, calls, and the organisation takes care and takes them through the journey. So we're talking about an improved business model, collectively sharing knowledge, skills, and experience that exists across the 19 organisations. We do great stuff. Some of us are doing fantastic stuff, and we need to be mindful that we are doing really good stuff. This is not about getting rid of that. That's about trying to grow and enhance that across the rest of the organisation. It's about filling out the white space that we don't do so well. We don't have anything in integrity. We do very little in advocacy and lobbying and all those different areas. So there's an opportunity for us to just make such a difference here. All the disciplines working as one, collectively learning to develop the business and improve service, improve our workforce resources where they don't exist. You know, we can share across what we do. We don't all have to have something in the same location, but today we would have to replicate everything in our organisation in the same location to do what we're trying to do. This way we can pool and share those resources. Consolidate our assets to build a stronger base and make cycling and AusCycling an easy sport for all to access. So it's about investing more into cycling. And when we talk about investing, what we're talking about is the 19 organisations and Sport Australia investing into cycling in Australia. It's about us investing our workforce collectively. It's about investing our members to create a voice. It's about investing financial and assets to create opportunity for the sport and strength. Under their proposal, Sport Australia will have agreed to inject an additional 2.5 million into the organisation to kickstart it. That's an investment. There's established strong and sustainable position, capitalise on financial opportunities through sponsorship and government support. So it's about creating a strong and sustainable financial position. Position the organisation and the sport for growth and for future proofing. And the opening net asset base would be in excess of $5 million if we collectively all come together. So we talk about preserving our strengths and growing cycling. I won't go through every line here. We've covered a number of these. One I do want to highlight here though is this one here. Establish a commission to honour our history and heritage. It's a very proud sport. Mountain bike's only about 30 odd years old, so we're probably still a bit to go. But there's 136, 138 years of heritage in disciplines, in clubs, in states. It's really important that this is preserved and these stories are told. And one of the commitments that AusCycling is about is to make sure that we do tell that. And we create a way and an avenue and an opportunity for that to be preserved. And that history is enshrined for future generations to learn and understand. The sport's pioneered its way through many challenges to get to where it is today. This is just one of those new pioneering steps. So I'm just going to jump over this one. So I've got a couple more and then Martin's going to pick up. So the AusCycling governance structure. So we're talking about creating an organisation that has a nominations committee, which is no different than what most organisations would have today. It's a profession, so we would have 3 representatives. I'll come back to that later. There's a transitional board. I'll jump over some of these and come to it on the next slide if that's okay. Once we get through the transition board, then there'll be a normal AusCycling board. The ownership, this is the critical one that I wanted to talk about right on this slide, is that the proposal we have is that the organisation will be owned by the clubs. There's 500 odd clubs collectively now. You will be the owners of this organisation. You are the heart and soul of this sport right now. You are the ones every weekend out there delivering the events, the activities, the junior programs, everything like that. It's only right that you own this sport and you will own this organisation. So that's fundamental in the structure of AusCycle. And my comment around that, and the comment is to all members involved in this process from the roadshows, is ask the questions, read the information, find out as much as you can so that you can make an informed decision, because you are the only ones that can bring about change. This is your opportunity to either sit in status quo or make a change for the future of the sport collectively. And so you are the ones who will need to vote, and I encourage you to get as much information so that you can make an informed decision about what you should or shouldn't do. And the other key thing is that Martin and Steve Drake and myself, as the current NSO CEOs, will not be continuing as CEOs in this organisation. It needs a new CEO. It needs someone to come in without the history that we all hold and who can stand up and lead a new organisation to a new future. And we are all in agreement with that. We believe strongly in that, and that's a very important part. The other thing, as we move on, I'm going to move on to the next slide. We've got state and territory advisory councils. These organisations are critical to the whole structure of AusCycling. Initially, every state and territory will have one of these. There'll be 9 members on these committees made up from road and track, BMX and mountain bike. Their role will be to drive the local office, to challenge the AusCycling management, to identify opportunities, to lobby for needs and wants, fill gaps, all those sort of things that are important to your local region, and everyone will be a little bit different. This is your voice into AusCycling from the coalface. And within these local committees, they'll do things, this is only a short list, but there'll be things around state team selection, discipline insights and management expertise. We won't know it all. We will be very reliant on people who are out there and have the history. And this is a new one that we've included following some earlier discussions around BMX fees. BMX states often set the fee for clubs, so the advisory boards will be able to establish and recommend a BMX club fee for the relevant states. It'll be very important to maintain our historical and archival matters, volunteer recognition and guidance on transition. This is critical. So if we move from here to this structure here, these state advisory committees, there's 8 of them, 9 people, they work in close connection with the local general manager and the local officers. These are your bodies, these are your voices into the organisation. They'll elect their own chair from within. So an independent chair, that chair will then sit up here on the National Advisory Committee. There'll be 8 members on there, and they'll elect a chair, and the chair from there will then sit on the board of AusCycle. So you will have avenue up through here into your local office and staff. They will have access to lobby and to work with all these different organisational pillars within the structure of the AusCycle management to deliver outcomes. But you will also have an avenue through this means to get your voices heard into the board of AusCycle. The AusCycle board is collectively made up of representatives initially in the transition from the 3 disciplines, road and track, mountain bike and BMX, 3 from each. The current chairs of the 3 NSOs have already been nominated to sit on the board of AusCycle, so there's 2 more nominees from each position, and there'll be an independent board member added, or 3 independent board members added to there through a process. There'll be 12 in total. It's a skills-based board, but also a representative board. These are the members of the nominations committee: Sharon Willoughby from BMX, Peter McKendry from mountain bike, and Linda Evans from road and track. And if you look at after year 1, so this is a board of 12 for the first 12 months. After year 1, that board will reduce to 9, and that will be the number of the ongoing board. And then every year there'll be an election for for 2 representatives. So when we've built the model, and I alluded to this at the start, it's about members and clubs. This is an inverted flow chart, so we have an org chart. We haven't shown the traditional org chart with the board at the top purposely. This is driven around members and clubs. We are creating a service business on a national basis. Local offices designed to deliver direct benefit to members through community engagement, sport and events, advocacy, education and development, all coming out and all serviced through staff within or a workforce within a local territory office. And they will be supported by staff and resources within a national support office, if you want to take it that way. There are some functions, such as membership, that will just be managed direct. But when we talk about that, and we've talked about strategies around, well, we operate on the east and we operate on the west, that we will have staff based on the east and the west in membership, because it's important that you can call in your phone and the phone is answered and your service is responded. So there's a number of corporate functions that roll here, but primarily this is where it's all centered around. And the national office is there to support and provide the assistance and the resources needed so that this area here can do its job through and up to members. So when we look at some of the functions or core functions that a AusCycling local office might do, we looked at it from a national perspective as well. This isn't a definitive list, it's just an example. There's a number of functions: shareholder and partner relationships. They'll be conducted by the local office and also the head office. There'll be federal or national-based stakeholder relations, there'll be state-based relationships. But there'll also be the opportunity that if you need to bring in support, if you want support from the national office or the local general manager does, that they can call on the national office staff or someone from another location to come and support them through the process. And then as we work down the list, we see some of the things like financing and budget and administration, member services, these will be at head office, HR, none of us have a HR resource right now. We work through the list. Business development is something that we all struggle to have. Diversity inclusion is something we do not have. And these are things that, and then we've got sport integrity. These are things that we need to start to address as a sport. These are things that governments are looking for funding and action from sport to do. The professional sports are all able to do it. Collectively, none of us do it right now. And these are areas that we can improve, and that will certainly open the door for further opportunities. Currently have a workforce of about 82 staff. This excludes high performance, so we've purposely left them off the discussions, of which about 42 are located within local offices or states and territories right now. Under the proposed workforce initially for AusCycling, we're talking about a workforce closer to 90, and the increase of the workforces in local offices. We recognise there's a need to deliver greater output there. But collectively within that, there's been discussion that this is all about saving money and efficiencies. It's about using our money better. It's about saying, do we need to have multiple audits? Do we need to have 10 people or 12 or 19 people doing finances? Can we consolidate that to deliver better outcomes? It's not about saving money, it's about redistributing that money to deliver outcomes and tangible benefits back to memberships and the sport as a whole. And I think this is my last slide, but the flow of funds. We've had a lot of questions around what happens with flow of funds. So collectively, most revenues for cycling sports comes from membership, grants, either be it state or national, sponsorship, be it either state or national, entry-related or event-related fees, and a few other minor sort of revenue streams. Everything goes into AusCycle. When we talk AusCycle, that refers to every local and state office. Refer to the earlier slide. AusCycle is collectively 8 states and territories. Goes into there. If the money is designed from a state government, it'll come out straight out 100% and be acquitted in your state. Same for local sponsor support. And AusCycle will be responsible for supporting your workforce and all your ongoing and current activities and future activities. It's all part of the operational planning year by year to deliver outcomes. There'll be some money held back or not held back, but it'll go towards supporting the national office expenses, and it'll continue to spend at least the same amount as is currently spent on the delivery of events and current activities as we do today, and hopefully more into the future. And that's me. Thank you.
Thanks, Shane. Just before we jump into the fun of voting models and all that sort of stuff, I'd just like to endorse the comments that Duncan and Shane have made about what AusCycling has to offer, and just say it's been a really interesting process to be a part of. I don't think there's any secrets in the room that at times relationships have been strained between the 3 organisations, but it's been fantastic to be able to come into a room with the 3 NSOs and actually put the past behind us. Don't worry about the history, don't worry about past grievances. All 3 organisations have come into the room and looked to the future and looked to say, what do we need to do to give cycling the best chance to grow? And that's been a really, really positive aspect of it. And as Dunk said, you know, we haven't been in these sorts of rooms with all three disciplines in there, with people interested about cycling, whatever aspect of it is, and looking to get the future going. So it's been a great process to be part of, and I've really appreciated that. Now, in terms of, Shane mentioned that the clubs would be the owners of AusCycling. So when it comes time for voting at general meetings, you're obviously pretty keen to know how that's going to work. We've come up with a proportional club voting model that gives a weighting to clubs based on the number of members that they have. We believe that this is a fair way of doing it. The voting structure is set up so that there's a diminishing return for, as clubs get bigger and bigger. But we felt that it was appropriate that large clubs had an extra weighting but not too much of an extra weighting. So we've got instances where a club has 10 members and there's another club that has 800. And if we did it on the basis of you got one vote for each member that you have, that'll result in a situation where large clubs could have 80 times the voting power of small clubs. And we didn't think that that was fair. Small clubs are a really important part of cycling, and there's reasons why clubs are small at times. They work in remote areas. They don't have large population bases. But we wanted to make sure that we gave them a voice. So we looked at a number of different systems and we came up with this proportional club voting model. And if you have a look at it, that sort of 100 to 149 member size club is where the balance of power sits. That's where that 50% hole is. And we think that's a pretty good place for it to be. Just quickly, once we actually ran these numbers, we realised that they actually lined up pretty nicely with the membership amounts. So you can see that Cycling Australia would have probably 43% of the members, 42% of the vote. Similar with BMX and mountain bike on 32 and 26. And once again, it also worked across state levels, where there was a reasonable correlation between the size of the state and the voting power that they have. So this is, in terms of who votes, relates to the question of will AusCycling be approved by the members or not. So there is I suppose a two-stage process of when these votes will come out to each state, and there'll be a vote at state level, and then there'll be a similar vote at a national level. So who votes? Well, in all of the states and territories, except cycling, ACT and Queensland, the clubs vote at that state and territory level. So each club in Tasmania will have an opportunity to have their say on whether they support AusCycling or not. At a national level, for road and track, for cycling and for BMX, those state and territory entities will then carry their vote forward from their club membership vote to a national vote. For mountain bike, they have a slightly different system in that each of their individual members has a vote. So that's a different system, but that'll be the vote that they will use to decide whether AusCycling is supported. We've got a number of dates set out here in terms of when those votes will take place. They're suggested dates for each state. We're happy to work with the state associations if they need to move those around a little bit. Obviously, we need to get some sort of certainty around this process of whether it's going forward or not, and we would like to have all those votes done by the end of December so that there can then be votes done at a national level and we can know whether this is going forward or not. Moving on to implementation. So at those state level votes and the national level vote, you're probably wondering what you're going to be voting on. There's going to be a number of resolutions that are put to the general meeting. So those resolutions are firstly to approve the AusCycling Constitution. So if you get onto the AusCycling website, you can download that constitution, you can have a look at it. Please do, have a look at it. See if you feel comfortable with it. There. We've had some work done on looking at the three current existing NSO constitutions and comparing those constitutions to the proposed AusCycling one. They line up very nicely. The only real difference is around the ownership of the organisation, who gets to vote at general meetings. In the current ones for cycling and BMX, that's the states. in AusCycling, that will be the clubs. The second resolution that would go to the meeting would be to authorise the transfer of all business and assets from the state associations to AusCycling. I want to be really clear on this because there are people out there saying that this is just a way to appropriate state organisations' money and put it into a national body. The only way that any funds can be transferred is if that's done by approval of the members. Right? The members have to make a conscious decision to approve a resolution to transfer funds. Okay? So there's nothing from national organisations going to be taking state organisations' money. It will happen if the members approve it and make a conscious decision to approve it. The third resolution will then be to approve the voluntary cancellation of the state entity. One thing to remember with the resolutions is they're conditional. Okay, so they are conditional when you vote at a state level. It is conditional and they only come into effect once the corresponding resolutions are passed at a national level. So if you're from BMX Tasmania or Cycling Tasmania and you want to support AusCycling, but you're a bit worried because what happens if we vote for it, other states vote against it and it doesn't go ahead? Have we voted ourselves out of existence? Have we given our money to somebody else? The answer is no. If these aren't approved at the national level, those resolutions that were voted and approved at a state level simply lapse. And you go on doing what you're doing right now. The other thing to remember is that they're special resolutions. So they require a 75% majority. Okay, so once again, it's going to require a significant majority approval of the members in order for this to go ahead. And that's fair. I mean, this is a big change. And we want to make sure that there's a significant amount of support for it. We can't mandate this from above. There seem to be some people out there saying that this is a done deal. This is something that, you know, it's just going to happen, doesn't matter what the states think. Okay, that's not the case. As we've seen, all these resolutions have to be passed at a 75% approval level, at state level, before anything can happen. So once that's happened at a state level, there's then a process where those similar resolutions are put at a national level, and if they're approved, then we begin the process of transitioning to AusCycling. There'll be a number of agreements, business transfer agreements, signed between AusCycling and the state organisations, and they're just about getting a better understanding of what's being transferred, novating existing contracts and agreements, you know, listing when assets will transfer, what assets will transfer, all those sorts of things. So that's pretty much the legal process for what would happen and what will allow a transition to AusCycling. If we have a look at what the implications are for a no vote, we don't really want to dwell too much on the negative side of things, but we've probably got to have a look at it and make sure that when you're considering whether you support this proposal, that you look also at what happens if we don't go ahead with it. And they really do revolve around lost opportunity. It's not changing anything that you guys are doing out in clubs at the moment. Right? You're not going to lose your club racing. You're not going to lose your state series events. You're not going to lose all the fantastic things that you do at your club, the community that you have at your club. That's all going to be there. That continues on without any effect whatsoever. What we lose is some of those opportunities that we've spoken about. No single licence for those people that want to ride across disciplines. The licence costs, you know, we've seen there's some winners and some losers in it. Not everybody's a winner in it, but across the board there's more winners than losers. And if we stay with what we've got, they'll remain the same or they'll increase. we lose the efficiencies and the duplication remains. There's still going to be 3 sports running 3 different CRMs, 3 different financial systems. We're going to be competing amongst ourselves for money from Sport Australia, and you guys are going to be competing amongst yourselves for money from the Tasmanian state government. There's not going to be an infrastructure team. One of the big challenges we've got is infrastructure for cycling. It doesn't matter what discipline it is. And there's lots of clubs out there doing great stuff, trying to get local government grants, state government grants to help develop their infrastructure, improve their infrastructure. We want to be able to help. But if we don't go through with this, you'll still be out there doing it by yourself rather than having a helping hand from a head office. We're still going to have limited capacity to lobby for rider safety. Right, we're going to be 19 different organisations all with really small voices. We're going to be really 19 different organisations, all with small voices. We're not going to be able to capture material sponsorship. As Shane mentioned, between 2.5 and 4 million people ride bikes on a regular basis. And we don't have $100,000 sponsorship amongst these 19 different organisations. And that's really letting our members down. But we can't do it until we become one, for the reasons that Dunk mentioned. Trying to get 19 different organisations to work together on a sponsorship, very difficult to do. We're still going to remain divided with government. We're going to be really easy to ignore because right now we are. Right, there's not one member of parliament, one minister that's sort of trembling in their shoes thinking at BMX Australia or Mountain Bike Australia or CA, that they're not taking our calls. We come together, we become 55,000 members, we start having a bit of pull with them, a bit of voice. We do well with our recreational riders and we become 100,000 members, suddenly we're talking. Suddenly they're answering phones. Our financial capacity will still be $2.5 million weaker. We'll still be 19 different balance sheets, all small, all undercapitalised, all trying to do their best, but unable to really make a dent. That fragmentation and the confusion with potential new members will exist. People within cycling understand. They understand mountain bike is a different organisation from BMX and we're different again from cycling. Right, we all understand that. But when little Gracie comes home from school and says, I want to take up cycling, Mum, she goes, bloody hell, where do I start? You know, which do I want Gracie on a road bike? Do I want her on a track bike? Should she be riding up a mountain? She's 7 years old. What should she do? Well, I'll tell her she should do BMX. But if we've got one organisation that they call, we can help. We can guide them. We can point them in the right direction. At the moment, we're too busy competing for little Gracie to actually point her in the right direction. And there'll still be limited career pathways for our staff. As Shane mentioned, every time we lose one, it hurts. Right? And Shane knows that because he's going through it at the moment. I know that because I'm going through it at the moment. When you've only got 6 staff members, if you lose one, it hurts. If we get those 90 people all within the one organisation, you've got cover, you've got a career pathway within it, so people don't have to come and work at the organisation for 3, 4, 5 years and then leave because they've got a better opportunity elsewhere. They can have that opportunity within AusCycling. We can keep the knowledge that they've built up over the years and we can use it for our advantage rather than training them for other sports to take advantage of. So what's the timetable for all this? Well, we've been through, in the month of August, we went through a number of discipline workshops. Each of the 3 NSOs invited their state associations into the room, or in mountain bike's case, a cross-section of their clubs. We went through the proposal that we had developed, took their feedback, had some really good discussions around that, took their feedback, incorporated that into the model, and then we held a combined discipline workshop where we had all three disciplines in the room at the same time. We had just about all of the state associations were represented there, and the clubs from mountain bike. And once again, we gave them the feedback on how we'd incorporated some of the points that they've raised into the model, and went through that again. We're now at the point of getting out and around Australia, speaking to clubs, speaking to interested members, and here today to take your questions in a very short period of time, so that we can dispel some of the myths that are out there, provide you guys with as much detail as we can, and hopefully get you guys having a better feeling for what AusCycling is and what it can bring to the sport. We're then looking at having voting at a state level in November, and then hopefully we've got great support for it. We then go into that detailed implementation planning phase. So there's a lot of questions we're getting around implementation and the level of detail that we can give out right now. The steering committee has made a pretty conscious decision. There's a lot of work that's gone into this model up until now. If we start getting into detailed implementation planning at this stage, we are going to be burning a lot of resources, a lot of time and a lot of effort on something that may not go ahead. All right? There's a feeling that they need to have some sort of surety that, yes, the members support this in order for us to get into that detailed implementation planning phase. Because it would just burn us out, and we all still have businesses to run. And we need to know that before we get into doing the hours and hours and hours and hours of planning that will take. And we also need to have the support of the state associations in doing that. We'll then look at having AusCycling operational in Q2 2020. Okay, so there's going to take a bit of time. Vote takes place this year. We're not going to flick the switch on 1st of January and say AusCycling's in place. There's a lot of transitional work that needs to be done. And we envisage it starting to be operational in Q2 of 2020. In terms of our transition approach, we believe that day one's going to feel pretty much like day -1 for you guys. As we've said, we don't want to change what you guys are doing at club level. We're not going to come in and put a whole lot of rules on you on what you can do and can't do. We want you to keep doing the things that you're doing, because it's bloody fantastic. But what we foresee is that over time, clubs will begin to understand that they're getting a greater level of support from AusCycling, whether that's through their local office or through the national office. Second thing is that the quality of the outcome trumps the speed of the implementation. This is a big project, and we're not in a rush to get this operational too quickly. Okay? If taking a little bit more time in the planning process allows for a much better transition and implementation, then that's what we will do. We will take the extra time to make sure that it is as smooth as possible for our members and clubs. Most importantly, the state and territory leaders are going to co-design their local transition. Okay, as Shane said, you guys at a state level know what's important to you. You know that better than we do at a national level. So we are going to bring the leaders in, and we are going to include them in designing and implementing that transition. And that is an absolutely fundamental part of what we want to do. And everyone will be respected through the change. Doesn't matter what discipline, doesn't matter what type of bike you ride, doesn't matter why you ride it. Okay, everybody's going to be respected. I can imagine you're all getting ready to ask questions. So, look, this is, we've been through it. These are the benefits of OneCycling, of AusCycling. No need for me to read them out again. But if we get it right, hopefully we've got something pretty cool.
Thanks a lot, Martin. Okay, it's pretty much time for questions, but just while all of that was going on, I got a note from Tracy Gaudry, who was the UCI Vice President, and she reminded me, out of the 194 member nations in the UCI, there's only 3 that don't combine all the disciplines, and one of them is Australia. So that's pretty, what we're putting to you now, or what's been put to you today, is just what's basically an explanation in logic, obviously, or at least that's what the majority would suggest. It's time that that cycling takes advantage of the glut of interest that came in the last few years. Cycling has been given a much bigger presence in the media, certainly a few years ago when Cadel Evans was winning the Tour de France, for example, and Sam Willoughby was doing what he could do in Rio before the accident. And we understand all of the disciplines have a great presence already in Australia. Duncan's highlighted the presence of the let's call it the e-cycling revolution, the Zwifting and the like, where there's huge uptake. That's not a detriment to cycling, that's a huge benefit to cycling, because people are coming to the art of pedalling and they're coming to love the bike, and they're just a bit anxious. Of the 2.5 million people who are riding bikes in Australia, no, there's not a very big percentage that are racing them. But that's probably because the infrastructure's not there at the moment, where, as Martin was saying, little Gracie, who's 7 and doesn't know what she's going to do, if it's all in the one umbrella group, provides a much bigger catalyst for anyone to want to take it up. If you're given the choice of racing a mountain bike or BMX or road bike or track bike or cyclocross bike or kicking a footy, you're going to be given an opportunity and you'll be given a choice and you can really take advantage of it. But I think that message has been drummed home already. So we'll just open up the floor. Does anyone want to kick off the questions? And we'll get someone with a roving mic just come over and see you in a sec. If you could just state your name and maybe what club you're affiliated with, that'd be great.
Kevin Jamison, I'm with the Mersey Valley Devonport Cycling Club. You've just said that there's 3 countries that don't have the amalgamation of the 3 sports, but most of those other countries also include social riding and all that sort of thing. How close is our plan here that you're proposing tonight to the other countries that have already implemented all the other sports, other disciplines, I should say, in the sport of cycling? Is it on the same basis, or are we creating something new as far as the UCI is concerned?
I can't give you the answer to 191 odd countries. But I could assume that the governance of the racing, which is what Tracy was involved with, which is what the UCI is involved with, would be largely based around not so much the bigger picture that we're presenting here, that's been presented here tonight, which is to account for political lobbying as well. But it's based on the federation members of the UCI. So I would assume that most of that would relate to racing. And then I guess it's up to every individual country as to how they.
But the UCI actually has the administration of clubs and state or unit areas that have got different laws and conditions that apply. I'm just wondering, are we trying to copy them, or are we setting up a new system?
I think what we're describing here is very common internationally. I don't know all the examples. Certainly in Asia and Africa and South America, I'm less familiar. But in Europe, in Belgium, there's one entity owned by the clubs, and they're used to doing advocacy. It's easier there. Yeah, the political piece, the advocacy stuff, the participation piece. Likewise in the UK, if you look at the UK model and the Belgian models, it looks like this if you merged with Bicycle Network as well and brought the whole advocacy piece together. So I think we're gravitating towards sort of the high water mark internationally. So we're not reinventing the wheel. We're trying to head to what's working well internationally. But there are lots of, in the US, BMX is out. So there are exceptions to it all over the place. So I think the US is one of those 3 examples, just because BMX is out, even though they're unified and very good at bike ed and participation and political lobbying, as you'd expect. And they're not as good as the National Rifle Association, but they're strong in the US. It's just those strange BMXers that have stayed out.
Thank you.
Very nice to see you guys here. I've been racing for 65 years and I've seen a lot of changes. Most of them have been bad. But anyway, Peter Fraser, Northern District Cycling Club. I'm the president of the club. Anyway, it's not me, I'm not talking about me. What I'd like to know is that I conduct races, we call them the Bums on Seats Cycling Series, where every member of the family races in the same race. And Dad might come along, he could be a superstar and he wants to ride with the kid. That's how Georgie Baker started. She started with me. And they bring them along. I said, yep, you can ride with the kid. Now what I want to know is this something that is readily accepted? Because I have families, there's people here who started with me. Mum, Dad, the two kids, all in the same race, maybe on the same mark. Now, that's what I've promoted. It's been very successful. I'd like to know your thoughts on that sort of thing.
Absolutely. We're going to embrace as many forms of cycling and racing as we can. We've had discussions in these forums about cycle or mountain bike jousting, all sorts of things. So I think that's what brings a unique flavour to the whole sport, and we would certainly encourage you to continue with that type of event, and maybe that can be shared with others across other regions and locations.
Thank you very much. Good.
Thank you, gentlemen. Phil Jarvie is my name, board member of Cycling Tas and member of Hobart Wheelers Cycling Club. Just a question on some of the operational details you may be able to provide some clarity on. You mentioned that some operational functions such as state team selection and related functions would go through a state advisory committee, and then ultimately decision making will be made by a state GM. Does that state GM sit within the 3-person headcount allocated to the state, or is that outside that 3-person headcount?
No, they would sit within the 3 headcount.
So that would be a more senior appointment.
Correct.
Within that group? Okay.
Correct.
Thank you.
Pat Dennis from Longford-esque Cycling Club. Up front, I'm totally supportive of this as an idea. I've been riding my bike for nearly 40 years, BMX the whole way through. Great idea. My problem, and a problem that pops up very regularly in conversations, cynical people like me, CA to a large extent is seen as the problem in terms of how the capacity of the sport has been developed in the last 20, 30 years. Shades of the Charlie era, things like that, the nepotism, the bullying. This is an opportunity to create something that is much, much better, but with a commitment to re-employ everyone within the organisation as it is. How can such a vast cultural change happen is the basis of where I'm at.
Sure, it's a very good question. And when we first started, and there are a couple of answers to it, when we first started thinking about it, we came to the view as the CA board very early on that we couldn't fix, because the conversation started, can we fix CA? And we decided, no, we can't fix CA. We've got to just shut it down and start again. And then there was a narrative that it shouldn't be a merger of equals. You know, CA should have 5 board seats and BMX should have 2 and mountain bike should have 1 or whatever it was, reflecting the size of the head count and the revenue. And we said, no, we're all a merger of equals. Thirdly, CA got itself into a lot of trouble 4 or 5 years ago. And I think a very bad decision was made to fix a broken organisation with debt, pre-Ken Hayne. Like if you've got something that isn't travelling too well, lending it money generally isn't the way out of trouble. But we've traded profitably for 4 or 5 years and have been, those who are left to pick up the can have been picking up the can. When you go through that type of hellfire, a lot changes. I run businesses for a life for things called private equity firms, and there's a completely new board over the last 4 years and a very different, largely completely different team. And the CA today is undercapitalised and understaffed, and you walk in and go, that bloke over there runs the NRS and single-handedly won the world's Wollongong, like where's his team? No, that's the bloke, and there's a reason he's got bags under his eyes. So it's undercapitalised and hasn't got enough people, but the culture, I think, is a warm, collaborative, healthy culture that's different to the one of old. And I've had some amazing conversations in my 2 years in the seat. There's a bloke called Michael Drapak who's put 30 odd $million into the sport. And my first week, I'm there. I said, listen, can I have the 10 most significant people who contribute to the sport? Jerry, blah blah blah. Drapak's in there, and I said, can I have his phone number and his and the email? And the answer was, no, we haven't got it. He's us, AIS, different view, blah 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 blah. So I go find it and go and see him, and we've got a great relationship. He's a great mate. So the organisation has changed a lot, but despite that, our view is the organisation shouldn't survive this transition. We've got to create a new culture, and I think we can do that.
I might just add from our perspective, from a mountain bike perspective, and I'll come back to your second question about the workforce. We needed to see fundamental change. We weren't interested in tokenism. Tokenism had been applied before in the case of probably mountain bike and BMX. We'll give you a spot on the board, put someone in the staff. You guys will be all right, that'll look after you. That's not good enough. And so we've come to this table and we're all willing actually to sort of roll out the past and put an end to it and start a completely new organisation. We've seen significant change over the time in CA and the operations, but it's not about CA and the brand, it's about the people that you work with. That's just a brand. And I think if we were in a room and CA's brand didn't exist, we'd probably be having a very different discussion, and we need to move away from the blame. We need to put ourselves into a new position. So we've come into it eyes open, but not about tokenism, about starting something fresh, building a new brand collectively with all the state organisations and the other NSOs. To answer the question about workforce, they're a really challenging one. It's something we've discussed and been considerate of, but there's a lot of really good people out there. And I think some of the things we've got to look at is why do we have that perception that these people may not be very good at what they do or are really good at what they do? And it might be that they're just limited in what they have access to or the resources to do it. So our belief is that there is so much knowledge and so much hard work that has gone into supporting all these organisations, that so the right thing to do at the start is to provide that loyalty back to those staff and put them in a position where they have an opportunity to really showcase. And I'm sure, like everything in life and business, natural attrition will come out. And but we've made that commitment because we believe that what they bring to the organisation, just in their knowledge, is so valuable in building this organisation right from day one.
I'd make 2 other points. One, if you look at the job description of most of these people, they're just undoable job descriptions. Like what do you do? You're the general manager of what? I do all of this, and you can't do any of it well. So this is in part about taking the existing people and giving them much narrower jobs. You're going to write policy. You're going to be in charge of pathways. You're going to run bike eds for kids. Like only do 1 or 2 things well rather than 5 or 6 things. And secondly, I've had people say all things to me, like everyone should get sacked, just push them out the door and start again. And other people say they're fantastic. Everyone, you've got to guarantee everybody jobs. The reality is they are fundamentally good people who aren't being paid much, who are trying really hard. And when you go through this sort of change, there's going to be a lot of change anyway. You're going to have to work hard. You know, I'm nervous about the fact that the 3 CEOs aren't going forward. I'd love it if they stayed somewhere in the organisation, but you know, the biggest risk is losing corporate knowledge. And I think you've got to work hard to hang on to the good people and tell them they've got a job rather than taking some sort of more extreme spill and fill bureaucratic solution.
I just want to add as well, there's a perception that it's for some reason a Cycling Australia takeover of the other federations. It's not that at all. It's yeah. Yes.
And that's the cynicism that I'm feeling from the conversations that I've been having with other people.
That's worth raising. I own a company called Ride Media. I've been a couple of years ago, I wrote an open letter to Cycling Australia lamenting what a missed opportunity had come and gone. And just to see these 3 blokes in the room together gives me a great deal of confidence. And it also highlights. Yes.
How to achieve that, so they're trying to achieve it.
But it's also one of the latter slides that Martin showed us. A lot of the policy hadn't been written, and it's obvious there's much detail. As someone in the media, I'd like to know what the plan is for the media, but the first thing is to get the system running, I would say. And Martin, did you want to add anything to that?
The 3 CEOs are leaving, but we're not doing all this work to walk away on day 1 and leave it with everybody else. And we will be there. Yeah, sure. And we appreciate that you're happy with us to continue. Yeah. Yeah.
Changing culture that does exist. There's a lot of talk about, sorry. Cycling recently, and it was quite possibly the most hot. Australia, maybe a single person, maybe so far. They're the things that need to be used to retain the people. The catch and keep is great, the availability is great, but retaining the vast bulk of the people is just the guys who just want to run the fight. And none of the people that I've been talking to have been hearing a lot of responses about how that retention is going to happen, or what will change within. And I only speak for CA because that's my personal experience. It's been 30 years since I had lived with and stuff. So that's why you're unfairly getting something. But that side of it is there's a vast gap between the 12 to 13-year-old kids who really want to try the lights the guys going to the Olympics and Tour de France, and then achieve a medal really just one opportunity to not have trucks and keep that and have some fun. That part, really.
So you want great service, you want someone who takes your call, all the concern, you want someone who will get back to you and will take on that problem for you and fix it. You want an organisation that has the capability and the capacity to actually make change and to deliver outcomes. You want a membership offering that gives you great value for not a lot of money, and you want to feel cared for and a priority. And that's what this is about. And that's where the combination of bringing all the disciplines together, we can help and support each other, because we all have great people, we all have great ethoses. And mountain bike is a lifestyle first and foremost before it's a sport. And we pride ourselves on that customer service, and as do the other organisations too. We just don't have enough people or capacity, and that's what this is about. How do we retain people? We listen to you, and that's what we've done through this process, to try and make a better model, to try and find a way to have a single licence, try and make it more accessible and easier for you to get in the sport. But what we're going to do is own the problem. We're going to own you as a member, and we're going to be responsible for not blame shifting, but for delivering the very best possible service we can. We just need a framework and a structure that allows us to have the support, the resources and the capability to do that.
Thanks, guys. I'm Michael from the Launceston City Cycling Club. Just a question about the special general meeting. If Resolution 1 is carried, but Resolution 2, the transfer of funds, isn't carried, is there a fallback position where those state funds could be used the same as a state grant and acquitted in the state that the funds are being generated in? So again, if Resolution 1 isn't carried, but 1 is carried for one cycling, but 2 isn't for the transfer of funds, is there a fallback position?
Look, I think what we're trying to build here is one organisation with one really strong balance sheet and one financial capacity that allows us to provide the services that clubs and members want. So you don't really get to buy into the organisation unless you're willing to put your investment in. If we allow for sort of people to say, yeah, well, we want to come in, but we want to ring fence our money over here, what we'll end up with is 19 lots of ring fenced money that can only be used for certain purposes. So in order to provide the organisation with the financial muscle that it needs to be able to do what we want it to do, everybody's got to be willing to make that investment. And I understand where you're coming from in some of these questions, because BMX has a good amount of money to put into it, and it's something that we've discussed and struggled with. Is that the right thing to do? But I suppose we've taken the view of, with the money that we've got, can we invest it in a way that delivers everything that AusCycling delivers? And the answer is no. So we've got to put our money where our mouth is and be part of this, what we believe would be a great organisation. And be willing to back that with our funds.
Ian Loft from Launceston City Cycling Club. I've had a lot to do with juniors over the years. I've been president. I'm also involved in Let's Ride. I've been involved in Let's Ride since it started 3 years ago. And so there's a few questions there I have. I understand your issue with staff, because it's been a revolving door at Let's Ride. I think there's about 5 different people I've had to deal with there, and I've had to actually help them understand what they're doing, because they don't. But we're with Arnie now, aren't we? And he's quite good, but I can understand your issues there. How can we see in the future that we don't continue to have that revolving door in there at Let's Ride, because it gets really frustrating having to keep going over the same things, and also with your national education program, how does programs like Let's Ride, I know one of the issues with Let's Ride is, I go into schools and I work with kids there. I work in the Launceston Club here at the track. I've got a program that I've set up. It's getting the kids from school over to track, and now you've got mountain bikes and BMX. And what I'm seeing there with like the guys that come here at the velodrome, the little guys I've got, a lot of them this year have been riding BMX or mountain bikes. They come up here because it's closed environment, no traffic, and so I'm seeing a real crossover. So what I'm asking is, as far as your national education program, is it going to be something that will be multi-skilled, BMX, mountain bikes, track, road? Is there anything in that planning and thinking, or are we just going, develop Let's Ride a bit more, or is there anything happening there?
The Let's Ride program is a really interesting one. I was around when it all got conceptualised and started, and it was one that I could never understand why mountain bike and BMX didn't work with CA on it, and I think that highlights probably why we're here now, saying there's an opportunity that was missed. I hate to say, I see the imagery on the screen, on the websites, and it's kids on mountain bikes and this and that, and we're not part of that program. And to ask your question, how do we stop the revolving door? We actually work together on these projects. We actually have staff within the different within this new one organisation that's able to work across that. So you're never going to stop people leaving your organisation all the time, but this way we can actually hopefully lower that impact that it has, and it's about mitigating the impact that it has on you at the delivery point. And I think that program itself is a great example of where we really have missed an opportunity to work together for the collective benefit of the sport of riding a bike or the sport of cycling. Around the Bike Ed program, it's about trying to get the sport more on the curriculum, more in front of groups around the schools and things like that. And obviously we already have a vehicle in the Let's Ride program that needs to be enhanced. And obviously we're about building an agnostic sport where it doesn't matter what bike you are, just get kids on a bike to start with. So the primary focus will be getting kids on a bike. We don't mind what bike, just get them on a bike, get them active, get them going, teach them some skills, inspire them and instill some skills so that they have some life skills. Someone often says, Steve often says, you can't swim to school, but you can ride to school, and all these things. So it's about us taking the lead. And when we talk about education, it's much about just teaching a kid to ride a bike. And we would use the vehicles that we've got already to do that.
Going back to your first question, specifically Let's Ride, the problem you've got in each of these organisations is there's nowhere to go in the organisation. If you've got a big organisation, people can have career pathways within the organisation and then move into other sports. When you've got these small organisations, you're not paying much really, so you go and find a really good person, you're paying them 30% than what they can get if they go and do some corporate job, and they do a cracking job for a year or 18 months, and they do it. I mean, who in the majority of people in this room don't get paid to be involved in cycling. We do it out of passion. So you get some young superstar, they come into Let's Ride, they could make 30% more down the road. They do it for 18 months. There's nowhere for them to go in the organisation, so they go. Part of creating a bigger organisation with more pathways is part of the answer to that. And also, you're living hand to mouth. You've got funding for 6 months, you've got funding for 6 months, it stops, you've got to let a person go, you get the funding back. It's just cottage industry stuff.
And I just think just to throw in my 2 cents worth, once you start with the children, and that's sort of the gold mine for marketers. So if industry starts to realise that if they can give a club a couple of BMX bikes and then progress that to a couple of track bikes, progress that to a couple of road bikes, progress that to a couple of mountain bikes, and the kids goes from one to the next until they find which one suits them, or they might excel in all of them. Who knows? But it's sort of like creating or fostering this ultimate children's omnium, if you like, where it's not just a variety of disciplines or a variety of races on the track, but a variety of races across the spectrum of cycling. And I think that for me, that would be a pipe dream. I think it's something that we should all strive to achieve, and I'm sure that the industry would get behind it and it wouldn't even cost a great deal. That's just for what it's worth. Next.
My name's Greg O'Rourke and I'm from Mersey Valley Devonport Cycling Club. Just wanted to ask, does if the new model gets up, do you perceive a different relationship between high performance and the rest of cycling as exists at the moment?
Someone said earlier, I think it was, sorry, I've forgotten your name, mate, Matt, there'd been a lot of talk about high performance. I thought high performance would be a really big issue, and I've got to say we've been asked very few questions about high performance. I thought the issue would be, and my answer to your question is yes, but I'll come back to, I'll come to it via a circle. You know, the reality is CA has been, back to some of the cultural contentions, a reasonably arrogant, paternalistic organisation historically, allegedly. No, I couldn't leave the room without getting a laugh. And you know, there's never been a BMX or a mountain bike in the CA boardroom, and the Commonwealth Government and the RIS tells us what our high performance policy is historically, and that's driven by the Olympics. You know, it's a gold hunt, and you know, I think as we become, this is a more sophisticated organisation. It's a third road and track, a third BMX, a third mountain bike, and I think, and there are lots of other issues. You know, we're not good at athlete wellbeing. We're getting better at it, but you know, the DRAPAC view of the world on athlete wellbeing is a very different one to the traditional high performance one. So I think, but persuading a government, and there's this narrative that we spend too much money on high performance. Someone said to me, in fact I think it might have been you, mate, that the complaint isn't so much that we spend so much on high performance, it's just that we don't, there's no money for anything else. There's no money for the grassroots and participation. In the UK, they might spend 10 million quid a year on high performance, but they spend 20 on the bottom of the pyramid, whereas we've got a lot of money at the top. To change that and say to the Commonwealth Government, for every dollar we want to put in high performance, we want $2 or $3 or $4 to spend on the base, on the grassroots, to take propositions to sponsors like the Bike Ed Woolworths discussion and the toy discussion and the Unilever discussion, so more money's coming to the grassroots, to have more balanced conversations about athlete wellbeing. I think an organisation like this can recalibrate where high performance sits in the plan, but it's been very hard to date. Is that an answer to your question?
But is that a process that might take, 5, 10, 15 years to recalibrate the relationship?
No, I think that's it's not months, it's a year or two, but it's pretty quick.
To that, I want to add that when developing the model, and it's been a big point of discussion for the three CEOs, and if you look at the model that we've developed, we've actually put a pathways pillar that sits next to the high performance program, because that's one of the critical areas that we're all falling down in. It's one of the critical areas we don't get funding. If we went after funding today, probably under the current model for high performance, you'd probably find it spent in the same things that it's spent in today. And so that would be a mistake. So what we've done is we've put in parallel a pathway pillar to develop all the athletes collectively that need to come through. We've got to create an avenue to bring the new athletes through from juniors up into the high performance program. The high performance program is a cutthroat program. It's got to meet a certain need. We also have a number of disciplines that fall outside the Olympic remit right now, and they wouldn't fall into that. So we have to create something that works with that, and we've created the pathways pillar, and that will come in from the start of AusCycling. How long it takes to get the two across in synergy will take a little bit longer, but there's a plan to do that and address the issue that I think you've highlighted.
I also note that Kate Palmer, who's the head of Sport Australia, is really doing a push for increased participation. That's something that the government's really backing, and I think that what we've seen outlined with the AusCycling model is something that sort of does, as Duncan says, build from the base of the pyramid and goes to the top. It's also worth noting that some of the guys in the HP, or some of the people in the HP unit, are contributing back to the grassroots. We see, for example, Sam Welsford, who's probably the most underrated superstar in Australian cycling. He's going to Perth on the weekend, and he's going to be From what he's told me, he's hosting a track racing carnival because he's aware that there's not that interest in track cycling that there used to be, and not only because he's good at it, but he wants the kids to understand what pleasure he gets out of it and what excitement can come from it. And so there is, ironically, a little bit of a pushback from the high performance that does feed back to the base, and that's something that I'm super excited about, and I hope that there's more people like Sam coming through and putting their money where their mouth is, so to speak, and their time and effort into building the community on their discipline, their pet discipline. Next question, anyone else? We've got a vacant microphone.
G'day, Doug Miller from or member of the Launceston Mountain Bike Club. I'm not from the club. I'm a private promoter, so I run mountain bike events here in the state. Is private promoters and that structure still part of the new vision?
Yes, it will be. So we're just finalising some numbers around club affiliation fees, so that process will still be there. It'll be slightly tiered based on member numbers. But yeah, private promoters will incorporate into that. We've just got to work through. There's probably a couple elements that we need to look at. There's service providers as well as private promoters. Mm-hmm. And in our space, we're actually now getting bike parks, mountain bike parks that are looking for support and opportunity and promotion. So all that will be worked into this new model as we go forward.
Good.
Peter Bird. I am from Launceston Mountain Bike Club, so that's fine. Thanks, Doug. I just have a question about the voting process and how that's going to happen in practice. From what I can see from what was explained, the MTBA members will be having individual votes. Is that correct?
So an MTBA, all current members, so just over 17,000 right now, will be invited to vote. I can confirm that the MTBA vote for AusCycle will occur at the AGM on the 30th of November. The ways that you will need to vote for that are either in person or in proxy. So you'll be able to submit a proxy vote. Under our current constitution, the chair can hold unlimited number of proxies, so your vote won't get discarded. So if you can't attend in person, but that's the way that you will need to vote. So you won't be able to do this one electronically because of the size, the type of decision that it is, but I encourage you to download and complete the proxy and submit it back, and then your vote will count. So it'll be 75% majority of those people who vote, not the 17,000 of those who vote.
And then similarly for the other state sporting organisations, BMX and the road and track, how is their process going to work?
Well, there'll be a number of the state associations that will be having their AGM around November anyway. So at that AGM, as I've said, the resolutions will be put to the members, and the members will then have an opportunity to vote on it at that meeting. If they aren't scheduled to have an AGM in November, then they'll call a special general meeting to go through that process. So yes, so the clubs are the people that vote.
We've got a couple of questions that have come in online, and Andrew J, he writes, just wondering if this was to get up, what is AusCycling plan or preference for areas with multiple clubs with different disciplines? Is it to merge one club for the area with different arms within it, or remains as separate clubs?
What we would like is whatever works best for those clubs. So if they all want to get together into one huge cycling club, then fantastic, let's go for it. But if it works better for them to stay as their individual clubs, then we support that as well.
And the second online question comes from Colin, who I assume is in Tasmania, because he's concerned that within a few years the Tasmanian operations of AusCycling will be run out of Melbourne or somewhere similar. Can we just respond to that, please?
So, as part of the Constitution, it's been enshrined that AusCycling is there for all members, all regions, all areas. And we're talking about building a business for the future. We're not talking about building a business to rationalise and end up with 1 or 2 locations serving everybody. We've talked about a model that's centred on riders, talked about a model that invests heavily and focuses on the local service delivery to that. We've talked about a model that on day one invests more money into the local areas. We're talking about growing the sport. And so, you know, there is no intention to close any office in any state or region. This is about, to your point, retention. That's the quickest way to lose members, is to downgrade their service and treat them with disrespect and relocate all your services back to some other location, particularly in this case back across the water to Victoria. I don't know why, you know, the concept, you talk about retention, it's about quality service, and that's what this organisation is proposing to do, is to deliver the utmost quality service. I would like to think in 10 years or 5 years' time that 3 becomes 6 and eventually becomes 9 or 10, because the number of people involved in cycling is growing and the need for more people to be there to support them are there. So if we take if you enter something with the view that it's all going to go pear-shaped, it's just a half glass full, half glass empty. There is no intention. It is enshrined in the Constitution. The organisation is about growth and prioritising members and service, and to do that you need to have workforce. And it's critical, and that's the intention.
With the CA having their vote, it's the clubs that had the vote, but are the clubs under any obligation to go back and have club meetings with the riders, with the members vote at the club level, or is it just the current executive of those clubs will cast the vote?
There's no, look, you would encourage clubs to seek the input and feel from their members. And that's why we're doing this roadshow, is to try and inform as many people as possible, so that you hear what we're talking about from the people proposing it, and you have a chance to ask questions now and later. So there's no obligation to do it. That's how you want to run your club. But we would encourage you to canvass your club and understand what your members are seeking, and do they believe in the benefit of this. But that is up to the individual operations of each club.
We would be taken over by Victoria, and yeah, that's right, crazy. And I said, well, that's not going to, can't happen, because you can't steer the ship from the back end. And I'm really pleased that you guys here are so as one. It's a bit of a strange concept, but it looks as if it could actually work. So good on you guys. But no, what you've said tonight has eased my mind, because we're saying, what are we doing with clubs? Oh, they'll take our money, because I organise a lot of races and I organise a lot of sponsorship, and that's that area, that's that race, whatever it is, and see that you're supporting that. It's good. Thank you very much.
Sorry, Kevin Jamison again. The concept of us paying to help the one sport to get up as a Tasmanian body, is that an ongoing thing every year, or is it just one payment in to get it up and running, or how does it work? Does the state actually hold money after the...
Who are you referring to, sorry, as in paying up front?
I'm talking about each state.
Okay, so perhaps if we roll back, so the proposal is that the state sport, or cycling TAS or BMX TAS or what in those worlds, would transfer their assets and workforce into the new entity. That's a one-time transaction, because that pushes all that in, and the state organisation would cancel its registration. And on a going basis, it's up to AusCycling to manage all future operational needs, meet all workforce commitments, and the staff located within the region would negotiate with state governments and all that to secure future funding. So it's a one-time transaction, because it'll all go in the first instance, and then it'll be all underneath the AusCycling umbrella. have I
So
not?
can the state negotiate if they have funding that they need to pay out yearly bills? Is there? I understand that you don't have to put into it, but if the state had obligations elsewhere, would they be able to pay those before they actually pass their?
Well, all existing commitments or leases, be it events or leases to offices or commitments that have been made prior to the commencement of AusCycling or the transfer date of monies, that all just becomes novated across and taken on board by AusCycling. So the easy example is staff, I guess, in a workforce. If you've got entitlements owing to staff for long service or annual leave or sick leave, and they come across into the AusCycling model, all that just carries across and becomes the responsibility and obligation of AusCycling to carry on. And that's the same in every activity around the business operations.
Thank you.
That's the question there?
Yep. Thank you.
So someone's written online, they're curious because they can race a triathlon without being a triathlon club member, because they can buy a day licence. So he's wondering, is it possible to do the same in cycling?
Yes, we will be offering day licences. So we hope that plenty of people take that opportunity to come down, have a crack, give it a go, and see that they love it, and eventually feel like they want to buy a full licence.
Just on that, and it could be, I can answer that it's been available in mountain biking because we've taken that opportunity and it's been fantastic. But it's also put us on the mailing list. Is it an opportunity for, let's say, for data farming, for example?
I wouldn't call it data farming. Look, in MTBA too, what we've done is if your membership expires, we keep you on the database until you choose to opt out. It's about sharing information. You've shown interest in a sport, and it just makes sense that if you bought a day license, it's your choice always to opt out, but it just makes sense to keep you informed. It allows you to link up and see what clubs or other activities might be in your area and things like that. So it's not about data mining. It's simply about giving you access to information, resources that may continue your journey into cycling.
Can I hijack this for a moment, mate? Agreed. The presidents of all the organisations have had a monthly call for 18 months. So, Noel from Cycling Tasmania once a month for the last 18 months has dialed into this, into a conversation, into a conference call about this concept from its very earliest days to where we find ourselves today. I asked the former president, Russell Hinwood of Cycling Queensland, to come along tonight because he's been one of the main drivers of the thinking and the strategy. And I thought it would be good for you to be able to hear from someone from slightly warmer climes, not that there's anything wrong with crisp Tassie, but to hear Russell's perspective on how we've got here today. And he wore a state's hat, like me. I put up my hand and said, when we were talking about the transfer of assets, CA should lose all its assets and it should go to a new co. Let's see if we can persuade BMX and mountain bike to roll all of their assets into a new co, and then let's see if we can persuade the states to roll all their assets, and then we can have a proper crack as a sport and as a sector. And Russell was one of the first people to put his hand up and say, I'm up for that. So it'd be great, mate, if you could share part of that journey and why you took the views you've taken.
Okay, thanks. Okay, I'll just stand in front here if you don't mind. So I actually flew myself down here at no cost to anyone. I'm like you guys. I absolutely love the sport. Blood, sweat and tears. You know that stuff? Probably a lot of tears lately. I've sat in a lot of meetings with the presidents. I've sat in with Noel. I greatly respect Taz. You are what can make and break this thing. Like, you've got to vote, you've got to contribute, you've got to have a good look at it. If you don't like it, fine, no. If you do like it, yes. So we've been giving our clubs info for some time. Initially it wasn't very much, it was a concept. It's got more and more over time. I just sat in a CQ meeting recently, a club meeting. It's hard to get the clubs involved because you're all volunteers. It's even harder to get the members involved. So the general feedback from us was members just want to know if they can keep riding and get a cheaper licence. But it's our responsibility at an administration level to actually believe that this thing's going to work. So we're up there just trying to give our clubs as much info as possible and let them make a decision. There's a little bit of leadership. You've got to give an opinion. You can't actually sit back and say, I don't think it'll work or I think it'll work. You've got to give an opinion, but it's ultimately up to the clubs. You folk have to decide how this thing rolls. I personally look at it a little bit unemotionally at times from a business perspective as well, because that's my background. And I see these 19 organisations rocking down the road in cars that probably should be off the road. Some of them don't have navman, they're not even on the same road. Some of them aren't going to reach the destination. Some of them are going to probably get pulled over by the police. There's some really good ones. There's probably some 3 or 4 really powering along, and that's fantastic. But unless we get in the same car with some great funding from these guys, it may or may not be 2.5, it may be 2.3, it might be 2.6, but this is a new car. Like, we're going to get a bit of respect for a change instead of driving our horrible old cars down the road. Brand new car, jump in it. We're probably even going to get some fuel and some regos and things to get along the road. So I just think it's something you really got to have a look at. Like, don't be backward in giving your opinions. Certainly give your opinions. Certainly ask questions. But have a vote. Have a vote. Thanks.
Just to answer the question about collecting the data, we do collect it, Rob, and it's enabled us to expand our database reach to upwards of over 70,000. So if we put that together between the collective disciplines, we would be probably talking potentially now to over 200,000, and that starts to become a real figure that we can use when we talk to partners. Doesn't mean they're all members, it just gives us a reach and an opportunity to have a much bigger voice. So imagine if we had 250,000 members, what our reach could be and the influence we could have.
And just on that, there's absolutely, if you're a cycling enthusiast and you give a cycling federation details of your cycling wants, what's wrong with that? Like, it's basically, it's better than Google Analytics if you ask me. They're just sort of seeing what you've searched for and feeding you more of the same rubbish that you've just bought because you've just Googled it. But anyway, it's a whole other topic. Sorry, that's a bit obtuse. Someone's just written in online and wanted to know why aren't vets part of this conversation. Does anyone have any contribution to make about the vets component?
Yeah, we're in discussions, or people, as this conversation has started over the last 18 months, lots of organisations have come and talked to us. Bicycle Network brought out a very supportive statement the other day, and who knows where that leads. But we've been talking to vets for 6 or 12 months. I grew up racing on the track and racing handicaps. There aren't that many handicaps in Victoria. Vets do an outstanding job. I think there's a real chance. I certainly hope they're a very fast follower. People have asked, why aren't all these organisations like Bicycle Network at this table today? I had a full head of hair 18 months ago and I've lost it all trying to get 19 people at one table. Trying to get 30 would have been the death of me. But I think there'll be lots of fast followers, and I hope vets, because they're a great organisation. And this needs to be a sort of a new school organisation with, Rob's data mining and other bits and pieces, but we also need to keep some of the old school things, and I think there's some really good old traditional things that vets continue to do well, but other parts of the sport have lost. So I hope they've got an important part to play.
On a topic you've just raised, someone's asked, what should we read into the Bicycle Network's recent comments in favour of AusCycling? Anyone?
maybe we're on the cusp of becoming a mature, collaborative sector that gives each other compliments rather than kicking each other in the head.
Sally Stratton from the City of Burnie Cycling Club. I enjoyed the car analogy, and to give you a bit of background, our club is probably a clapped out Tirana at the moment that needs a bit of remodelling, and my biggest concern is what happens if the new car crashes.
Okay. We work really hard to get it then back on the road, and we repair it, and we go again. It's like what we do in life. It's what we do in business. But I back the new car isn't going to break down, and I back it because it'll be a collective strength throughout the nation. If we all take this step into this new organisation, the last thing anyone should be doing is stepping into it wanting it to fail. So we step into it wanting it to succeed. And that means that we all commit to making it succeed, and we all commit to making it successful. It doesn't mean we'll all agree all the way along, but we're working and we're collectively building something that we can be proud of, and it'll have some challenges. There's no doubt about it. But if we fall and we struggle and we hit a post or whatever it is along the way, if we use the car analogy, we fix it and we move forward. But we fix it together. We don't fix it by pointing the blame at someone else. We fix it together and we move forward together. And that's how we get our collective strength. And to me, that just makes sense. And I hope that the rest of you can see that as well.
The benefit of where we are today is I think we're in a car crash right now. It's just a slow motion car crash. So we've got time to like one of those road safety ads where it's sort of, the fast version, the slow version. We're in the slow motion, disaster, and we can hop out and create a different one. But people say, how can you guarantee it's going to work? And my answer to that is, I can guarantee you we'll make mistakes. Like if you don't make mistakes and things don't go wrong, you're not trying hard enough. Is my approach. But as I said at the get-go, a lot of people have spent 18 months trying to work out the best way to do this. This is the best answer we've been able to come up with. And if you set it up for success, if you treat everybody equally, or if you treat the three disciplines equally, if this is really it's really a democratisation of the sport. Now create a new entity and hand ownership back to the club. So the grassroots own a new entity, and the old model's gone. Get a good board, have enough of a balance sheet, you can start to pay people properly and have career pathways so you don't leave Let's Ride and go to the next thing down the road. Now, really well-intentioned, able people have done the best they can, with the exception of me, to create a great model. And I think there's every basis to have a glass half full view that it's set up for success. But you can't guarantee something's not going to go wrong. In fact, I guarantee you a few things will.
To avoid criticism, say nothing, do nothing, be nothing. So inevitably, if you've got to take a chance at times, I suppose. Is there any other questions? Because we had a particularly vocal crowd in Sydney on Tuesday last week, and it's good to see another arm go up in the air.
Gary Woodfall, Northern Vets Cycling Club. I'll just get back more to a few mundane things. How much do you envisage it will cost clubs to affiliate with AusCycling? That's one. I'll get that one answered.
You want me to? Okay. So clubs basically at the minute pay across the disciplines anywhere between $180 odd through to about $600, depending the discipline and the location. So the intention is to not see the price go beyond that. We certainly want to try and keep the prices down as much as possible. We haven't quite got to the point of setting it, but it'll be in that range somewhere. But we're conscious that it's only one location that charges the higher end, so we certainly will be avoiding that endeavour to bring it down to make it a comparable cost.
And the other thing, very localised to Tasmania, especially in road and track cycling, we have what we call here a regional licence, which is lower than possibly the mainland states, except for some areas of the mainland states. We had a good executive officer who organised that with Cycling Australia. Are we likely to keep that, or is that going to disappear?
I lived in Cairns for 6 years, and I had a regional licence, and I've moved back to Melbourne, and I'm refusing to get a Melbourne licence. I'm staying with a regional licence in Queensland, so I've been told I'm not allowed to answer this question.
So the answer for that is that we're aware of it, and we've certainly looked at it. It's about trying to rationalise all the memberships. When we went through it, I think it was some ridiculous number of 250 to 300 when we put everything together. And we knew that there would be some winners and some losers, and we tried to get it as close as possible. In regard to the regional licences directly, we're looking at an opportunity to maybe try and grandfather some of those for a period of time. But at some point we need to try and synergise it. But in the initial instance, we'll look to see if we can grandfather that for a period.
And the rationale for that, I recall it, is if you're living in a regional area, you haven't got the access to the calendar you do if you're in a metro area. And I think over time, as we fix the sport and it becomes healthier, I get complaints from time to time about racing clashes. We've got this event clashing with this event. Why do you let that happen? My answer is historically, the more clashes there are, the better. If you've got 20 events on every weekend nationally, the sport's really healthy. So I think if this does succeed, there'll be more product, more racing, and the rationale will hopefully drop away because you can race. And by the time I left Cairns, you could race every weekend. And the argument for a regional licence was I think there was 30 crits a year or something. So as the health of the sport comes back, I think the rationale does drop away.
Just in relation to the one licence, there was a dirt-only option. Is there a reason that there wasn't a road track option as an only option? I know it's one licence system, but yeah, it's just a question.
Shane's a good negotiator.
There is, and I guess we have done a bit of work. We've looked at other models, and we've prefaced this off the British cycling model a little bit. There is not a surcharge, but there's a higher fee for a road-only fee. There's inherently probably more cost with road racing than there is with dirt racing. We had to be mindful to try and make sure that the pricing that we put forward was acceptable to all and not too much of an increase in some cases. And the truth is that unfortunately cycling has been very expensive in comparison to the other disciplines, and we can't hide from that fact. It's driven up by a variety of reasons, but to take that all the way back down or to offer a road-only option, which in essence could have potentially halved the cost of what the current road licensing did, would have put too big a hole in the financial model going forward. Obviously, as time goes on, we would like to see that rationalised down to a single price, and that can happen when we get an increase in volume of membership and we can improve the financial overall in the organisation. But it was just a position that we had to take. We have come down, in most cases on the road pricing to what, I think some people are paying well in excess of $300 or $300 more. So there has been some savings there. There's been some little increases in other disciplines, but the reason is that the model would not support it because of the historic charging, which has probably been driven for a number of the reasons that we now find ourselves where we are.
I think we were sort of aiming for 3 hours. We've gone 2.5. There was one more question that's come online, and it's basically how will revenue be maintained as licence costs are driven down? It's is that echoing a little bit of what's just been said? So
I think a strategic objective of the organisation will be to drive down membership costs and minimise our reliance on it. I think historically the reality is that these organisations are addicted to government funding and membership funding. Haven't been able to get their act organised and develop commercial revenue streams, and when things go wrong, it's generally the members who get slugged. So I think our objective needs to be to drive down membership cost as much as we can as we grow non-sport government funding and commercial revenue streams.
It's an exciting time for cycling. I know that I'm looking forward to the World Championships coming up in Wollongong and on the road. I saw what the impact of Geelong was in 2010. That was just outstanding. That was probably a halcyon time for Australian cycling, where you could hear a collective roar all around the streets of Geelong when the breakaway with Philippe Gilbert and everyone was caught, and then it became the sprint for Thor Hushovd and everything. We see the World Championships on the road. I'm talking from a roadie perspective because that's my raison. That's what I do. But there's the World Championships coming up in a couple of weeks. We see Michael Matthews in fine form. I think we're going to be cheering. We know that Chloe Hosking just had a win on the weekend in Madrid. There's a whole lot of action going on around the world, and that all comes from the base of the clubs and guys like you coming in and just showing the love that you have of cycling. And this initiative here with AusCycling, something that's exciting. There's a small window now until voting in November, and there's going to be a lot of talk still going on, and we encourage that talk to be shared in your Facebook groups and everywhere that you're doing it. But when you are speaking, we are a community. We're trying to make the cycling community bigger, better, stronger. That's the whole genesis of this idea. Also more versatile, and I think if we can have the tone that we have enjoyed throughout tonight's evening, where it's a positive, an upbeat feel rather than the cynicism and angst and anger and criticism, which I'm also guilty of, I think that'd be fantastic. There's going to be more and more questions arising, and that's perfectly fine. But there's also a mechanism in which you can ask more questions. There's a website, auscycling.com.au. There's FAQs on there. That can grow as the voting date comes around. And can I encourage anyone else to ask any more questions, or do you all feel like everything's been answered this evening? I don't want to just stand here and talk to you until it's late in the evening. So I'd like to say thanks very much for coming. We've got another question. I've forgotten your name already. Again, sorry, excuse me.
If this comes around to one cycling, do we still keep our mountain bike and our BMX clubs as they are now, and our road and track clubs? And if so, would either one of those clubs be able to take in members from other disciplines, or is it going to be just those disciplines? Do you understand?
No. So no change to your club operations. If you've got a mountain bike club or a road and track or a BMX club, it stays exactly as it is. Under the AusCycling licensing or membership, you can be a member of multiple clubs. Clubs to me are about community. It's about giving back, supporting community. If you want to be a mountain bike club member and a BMX club member and a road and track member, by all means. We're giving you that avenue. What we're saying to you is you don't have to go and buy another license to race those. That's really the change in what we're talking about. We've got it was raised in the Adelaide workshop forum that we did. Someone said, "Oh, now I can join 2 track clubs. How cool is that? I can support 2 track clubs and race in extra races." So it's just creating more access.
Yep. So if, for instance, the licence here in Tasmania to do all disciplines is going to be exactly the same as the one in Victoria and New South Wales?
Correct.
Yep.
Nationally and recognised nationally. So if you're a member here and you travel and you go to Queensland because it's nice and warm, I'm feeling the cold, certainly you can just jump on and race BMX this weekend and then go and road the next weekend, and it's all on the one licence. You've just got coverage. Just pay your entry fee to the club and you're there.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, thanks very much for coming along, and we'll see you out on the trails or on the track or on the road. Thanks, guys.